Thank you. I wanted to continue to say that I appreciated the chairman's sincerity at the time that I actually met with him to discuss the upcoming budget. And one of the reasons I appreciated his message of fiscal austerity was I didn't go with my hat in hand, and instead I talked about the opportunity for real reform during a budget crisis that we are presented with. I wanted to think and talk about how we traditionally do the budget and how we have an opportunity to change that. And because of that, I didn't file budget earmarks, but I did file amendments that I thought were good government amendments that we could embrace. Now, I'm not actually getting up and speaking about a prior amendment that would actually make this reporting of the previous year's fiscal expenditures available 30 days after we actually vote on the budget and the governor signs it. Instead, I'm actually giving Ways and Means and the Speaker's leadership and the Senate leadership an opportunity going forward for an entire year that prior to the next fiscal budget report that comes out next year, that we'll actually have a detailed itemized budget of these 3 line items. Now you might ask, what does that mean? Well, last year, for Senate operations, there was an appropriation that started out with about $18.9 million. And after 9 C cuts, because all of the members in the House and the Senate knew how dire the circumstances were, we all were willing, with the leadership of the previous Speaker and the Senate President, to offer up cuts in our own budget. Yet none of us know where that money came from other than the fact that there was one number that said House operations and Senate operations. In the case of the Senate operations, we went from an $18.9 million budget, and after Ways and Means, after 9 C cuts, it went down to $17.9 million. It's about $1 million savings. In the House operations, which was at $33.7 million, after 9 C cuts, we were at $31.9 million. That was approximately a $2 million savings. I thought Mr. Brownsberger was coming to say something. No, that's quite all right. For the joint operations, this is the big one, folks. We started out last year with $6.9 million, and what was offered up to the 9 C cuts was about $6.5 million. All totaled, we're a little bit under $10 million. That's $10 million, folks, that came out of 3 accounts. And I appreciated the fact that we were able to do that. But that got me to thinking, if we were able to do it last year, and if you look at what we've put in this year, we've basically put that amount of money back in with a few minor adjustments. But how could $10 million be cut without acutely feeling a pinch? I know we all got the message about turning off the lights and supplies being limited, but we were able to survive without that $10 million. And this year, we're putting essentially a fair amount back in, at least $8.5, $9 million. Now, without itemized reporting of these line items, I believe we undermine our ability to actually advocate for funding going forward. I mean, if the public doesn't trust us, which we know we're dealing with and we're trying to reform our ways of government, they don't trust us in the way that we are actually governing to legislate appropriations, then why would they trust us if we don't even know what's in our own budget? Now, we have a new Speaker, we have a new Chairman of Ways and Means, and I have an awful lot of confidence that they're willing to think about reforming. I just think we have an opportunity going forward here in this budget to make a statement to the public that we have a duty to rise above public expectations, to conform to a higher level of transparency and accountability. We should be turning every stone in the field of efficiency over to see what can we do. And I think the public has a right to know how we spend our money. I don't think there's any mystery to it. We know we have capital operations within the leadership of the House and the Senate. We know we have personnel. We know we have accounts for personal expenditures that relate to committee work. We know we have postage. We have nothing different than any other state in the union. But what is different is a basic understanding of how we spend those monies. Now, why I say that's important. You could take the New York Assembly, and I'm going to do a little comparison. It's a 30-page itemized budget of their budget. I'm not talking about the whole budget we're voting on today. I'm talking about our budget, ours as legislators. New York has a population of 19.3 million, Massachusetts 6.4. They have a total budget of $132 billion. Ours is $27.5 billion. Legislative members in Assembly, 212 members. Their Assembly budget is $103 million compared to the House's of $32.9 million. That's excluding the joint operations. Now, New York can break down each legislative budget line item within their operations into personnel and non-personnel. Additionally, they itemize salary payments, temporary service, personal allowance to members, supplies, travel, rentals, office space, utilities, postage, shipping, telephone, equipment, maintenance, and repairs. There's nothing to be mysterious about what they put in. But businesses do it to itemize their budgets. The public is looking for transparency, but more importantly, I'm going to make the point why I think this is more important to do for our ability to understand what's a priority for each and every one of us, not only back home to our districts, but to the Commonwealth. You've heard the old proverb, what you don't know can't hurt you. Well, in this case, I think what you don't know is hurting us. It's hurting us because it doesn't demonstrate, even going into the future, that we're going to do business differently and we're going to be more transparent to the public. It hurts us by our collective appearance, folks, that somehow we're pocketing funds that we may not need or that we could do without, or more importantly, that we could put towards very important service programs that we're cutting here today. Where I come from, $10 million is a lot of money. And even if you put down $9 million the next year to replace it, it's still a lot of money. By not itemizing our budget, our own budget, we can't see how things are truly spent. We don't know what we'd truly miss. And we don't have the opportunity to fund core safety net programs that many of us are not going to see here today. Earlier, a member, my gentle friend from Lynn, said Santa Claus wasn't coming in that door and Easter Bunny wasn't coming in that door. But I have to tell you, I know St. Nicholas is going to visit this chamber before we're done. And some of the core safety net programs we think are important are going to be put in, and so are some of the individual priorities of members here are going to be put back in. But I'd like to see more of our ability to reconcile with the general public that if we can't even come clean with how we spend our own money, and if we had $10 million last year that we were able to offer up with 9C cuts, maybe we should be putting some of that money into the core service programs that I might not have offered up, that another member here thinks is important, for mental health crisis intervention, for substance abuse, for our youth building, homelessness, the list goes on and on. If you don't believe in transparency in budgeting, don't vote for this amendment. If you're comfortable not knowing how leadership, and that's including all of us because we have a voice in that, spends our own budget money, and you can explain that back to the people in your district, then vote red. But if you want real reform in how we do budgeting going forward, then I would suggest to you that this is an opportunity that should be seized, not lost. This is a good government piece of legislation we could all embrace. We have the budget expertise in this building. I have greatest confidence in Ways and Means to be able to execute it, to come up with the line items, to work with the House Speaker. But in the past, we haven't had the will, and perhaps we haven't had the crisis to engender us to act. But now is the time we can do that. And I would appreciate support on Amendment 507, and when you call for support, I would ask for it to be called with a vote of the yeas and nays. Thank you, Madam Speaker.